Body tonight. Oops, my camera is a little tilted. All right, let me get a view of everyone. Good to see. I had a few others who said they were coming. They may pop in as we go. But remember, you can do chat in private as we go, and or we can all talk together and hang out. So good to see everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Somebody nod their head because everybody's just looking and I'm not sure where we are. And to those who are watching on the stream on Facebook and YouTube, welcome. And you guys won't get to be a part of the conversation. If you go to the website real quick at pastor-paul.com, you can join in and be a part of it. So, wow. So let's go around the horn real quick and just very quickly say where you're from and what is the weather like where you are today. And Debbie Rude, start us off.
Well, I'm in Fresno, California, and I just got out of my car and it was 111 outside. I was thinking that my air conditioner works better in my car than it does in my house, so I could just keep driving around.
Fresno is just about the temperature of the surface of the sun right now, basically, is what.
I think so. Yeah, it's pretty intense.
All right, who wants to go next? Jump in.
I'll go. I'm Mavis, and I'm outside of Denver in the foothills. It's very hot. I'm going to go get a fan here in a second.
What is hot in the foothills of Denver? What's the temperature like?
You know, I bet it's probably 95 or so.
Oof.
Maybe 90, but it's 10 degrees cooler here than it is Denver, so I'll take that. But we don't have air conditioning, so kind of hurt.
That's a little rough.
Yeah.
I'm Vicki. I'm in Frederick, Maryland, and it's very humid and hot here. It's been in the 80s all day.
At least we don't have humidity here in Fresno, but when it gets to over 106, I'm not sure it matters anymore.
I'm Marcianne, and I'm in Mount Vernon, Washington, and it's about 75. It was kind of a cool day today.
So we're all jealous of you, and I don't even want to hear from you, Wendell, what your weather is. It's going to make us all unhappy.
Well, it's been hot, so here hot is like in the 80s. So hopefully it'll stay that way.
Very nice. And where in Washington is that?
It's north of Seattle, about an hour between Seattle and Vancouver, Canada.
Okay. Very cool. All right, Wendell, I'm sure you have a better weather report than a lot of us do.
Not so much. There was a storm that passed to the southwest of us. So it's 86 winds from the southwest at about 10 miles an hour. We have really big surf right now. 25-foot surf on the South Shore. Oof. So that's major. That's Waikiki, basically, right? South Shore. Yeah.
Very nice. Natalie?
I'm a little north of Salt Lake City, Utah, and it's like 100 degrees. It's pretty bad.
Whew. Ugly, ugly. All right. Well, welcome. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. These are what we're calling unconventional conversations.
Hey, Paul, real quick, did we hear from Marcianne?
Oh, did I miss Marcianne?
No, you didn't.
She's in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry. That's Mount Vernon. Okay, threw me off. Well, real quick, I'm Ashley. Everybody, I'm Paul's wife, and I am from the other side of the wall from where he is, and also where Debbie is in 110-11. And we have a 2-story house, and it is probably 75 degrees downstairs and about 85 degrees upstairs. So we are both downstairs, to say the least. And that's at the air conditioning full blast.
No matter how much we crank the temperature upstairs, we cannot cool it down in this type of weather. So it's very ugly.
You guys haven't had any rolling blackouts yet, have you?
I don't think we
Okay.
have we?
No, we haven't. I did get a text yesterday from like California Energy Saver, like this happy, like, be sure to turn off anything you're not using to avoid brownouts. And we have tripled it like 105 plus for like the next week solid. So, I mean, fingers crossed that breaks, but also who knows where we'll be this time next week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we're fortunate that we haven't had any grid problems here yet. And we know our friends in Texas are maybe up against it a little bit there. So, but everybody stay cool in the midst of all of this. So I like to start with just taking a moment and recognizing everybody on the screen and realizing that we are spiritual beings together, and we can connect by spirit and by place. Ashley and I always like to hear where everybody's from because we feel connected by place. And so we just honor you and the spirit of heaven in you. And just take a moment and look at everybody else on the screen. We have some folks with us from YouTube and Facebook as well. And just take a deep breath. Let your chair support you. Hi, Jan. Good to see you. And just imagine yourself as a spiritual being, just being connected to the other people here, and that we are going to share this moment together spiritually or intellectually, but also spiritually through the internet. And just honor this moment of being connected to these amazing creations of heaven that are together with you tonight. It's a beautiful thing. So the spirit of heaven in me honors the spirit of light in you and just says, you're amazing. I'm glad to be with you. So this is our first of what we will have as monthly conversations called Unconventional Conversations. And I don't know, I came up with that name because I'm sort of an unconventional pastor and talk about unconventional things. And so I like to have unconventional conversations. And I'm trying to work on my tech as I go here. So bear with me as I do that. And here. All right. So our unconventional conversation tonight is, am I still a Christian, and will God be angry if I answer questions? Can you guys see that keynote on the Zoom? Okay, good. Good. So I am Paul Swearingen, and otherwise known as Pastor Paul. Some of you came through my website to get here, pastor-paul.com. And really what I do, and my wife with me, is we are compelled to work with people and give permission to pursue emotional and spiritual well-being, and to do that in community in this season. And I offer, as a part of this, we will do these conversations free every month. I just want to make you aware that I offer mentorship for those who are walking through a spiritual journey and rethinking. We call that Deconstruction U, and a mentorship with Pastor Paul, where we have 5 one-on-one meetings together, study notes for guided learning together, and then we go through my book, Joseph Comes to Town, together, which the audiobook version is included with the mentorship. And so I just want to make you aware that sort of part of the way I make my living is doing coaching for people who are having a spiritual journey, and also for those on an emotional well-being. And so Deconstruction U, this mentorship, is something that I've started offering because a lot of people have been asking me about it. And so just for you to consider that, and we'll talk more about it at the end. And I'm offering a special deal for those of you that are on this here today. And so very quickly, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share a little bit from my teaching. There's going to be time to respond and discussion questions during the presentation. We'll have a little bit of a discussion time, Q&A, and then we'll end the stream. And those of you in the Zoom room will get to have a little more community around our discussion time together. I have a few rules I like to throw into all of this that all are welcome to share. No idea is going to be ridiculed, but I do allow for disagreement. We can say to one another, I'm not sure I buy that. And you can even say that to me, and you should say that to me. But make sure you're listening empathetically, actively, and with the intent to encourage, respond, or follow up. You can raise your hand in the Zoom room whenever you desire to share. I may or may not see it. Sometimes you may have to yell out and say, Paul, can I say something? And comments in the chat box of the Zoom room will be kept private from the live streams. And you can use your Zoom room reactions if you so like. Couple of notes. If you find yourself always jumping in first, consider saving space for others. And if you find yourself never jumping in, consider if you feel safe to jump in yourself. And all of us need to continue to think, am I speaking more than others? Maybe I need to make space, or do I feel safe to jump in? And I'll keep us moving forward on pace, which means there may be a time that I say, I'm going to jump in and we're going to go a different track or something like that. And that doesn't mean I don't like you. That means we're just going to keep moving it forward. And if you can keep your camera on, that's preferable, but not required if you don't feel safe to do that. I always like to say this: silence is okay. If it's silent, maybe somebody is contemplating jumping in. They're thinking about something. So let's not be afraid of silence for a little while. Don't feel like you have to fill that space necessarily. And also, I like to say we're here to share life experience. So be cautious of telling my aunt in New Jersey stories or preaching like we all should. When we share, let's talk in terms of this is what I think. This is what I believe. This is how I'm living this out, because your experience is vital and important and valuable, but us preaching to each other, maybe not quite as much sometimes. And if you're going to talk about something triggering, just make sure and say, hey, I'm going to talk about something that could be tough for some to hear, so people can consider if they want to stay in there. And always observe the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated. So with that out of the way, let me just share a couple of quick things with you as we get started in this conversation, and then we'll have some discussion around that. And I always love this quote from Rachel Held Evans from her book, Searching for Sunday, which is always the first book I recommend to anybody who's on a deconstruction journey of their faith, because Rachel herself, who has now passed on and gone to heaven several years ago, had an amazing deconstruction journey to share with all of us. And she says about her book that I'm writing because sometimes we are closer to the truth in our vulnerability than in our safe certainties. And I want to invite you, those of you who are following on YouTube and Facebook, you may know for certain what you know, but let's put certainties aside and let's start to say, what if there is another way to look at the things we're talking about? And one of the ways that we see that in the Bible is this story from Acts chapter 10, which is Peter's vision of the animals in the sheets. And Peter is up on the roof of his house, and he's hungry and he's waiting to eat. And all of a sudden he has this vision of these sheets coming down with these animals on it. And they're all of these animals that have been banned from eating for the people in Peter's religion. And Peter says, wow, this is really interesting that the sheet has come down, particularly while I'm hungry. And he hears a voice from heaven say, Peter, eat those animals. And Peter says what we can translate rightly from the story in Acts chapter 10. He says, hell no, Lord. Hell no. I'm a good Jewish boy. I will not eat these foods that are banned by Scripture. I would never violate Scripture, Lord. And it's interesting that he's saying hell no to his sovereign Lord. But 3 times this happens, and the voice says, eat this food. And Peter says, not a chance. I will not violate Scripture. And the voice from heaven finally says, Peter, don't call unclean anything that I call clean. And this voice from heaven at that moment is saying, Peter, I know what your interpretation of scripture is. It's what you've been taught since you're a little boy. I get it. But I'm telling you today, we are setting that interpretation aside because I have something important for you to know. And that is some Romans are going to come to your door. And as you've been banned from eating this food, you've also been banned from hanging out with Gentiles. And as of today, that rule is no more. Your scripture is not going to be more important than the relationship I desire for you to have with Gentiles and all the peoples of the world. And suddenly, Peter's certainty of his interpretation of scripture is blown apart forever, much to his chagrin, I'm very, very sure. And that is the story of Peter there in Acts chapter 10. And so I'm sure for some of you, you've had your beliefs and thoughts and religious interpretations blown apart. And so I would love to just pause here for a moment. And would any of you want to share, like, what started you on a deconstruction journey? What happened that made you start to think, maybe my interpretation that I've been taught of everything isn't exactly where the heart of heaven is in this season? Would anybody want to jump in and share that at this moment?
I will. I mean, honestly, from the day that I accepted Christ when I was 19 years old, I have had a hard time with the idea that certain people were going to heaven and the heaven and hell thing. It's always bothered me from the very, very beginning. Always. And so I lived 20 years, I guess, raising my children and kind of ignoring that. And then when I went through a divorce and my world kind of fell apart, all my questions kind of came bubbling to the surface, and the whole thing kind of blew apart. But I never ever understood that. Never.
So that little bit of change in your beliefs, you said it all blew apart from there?
Yeah, pretty much.
And how was that experience for your belief system to start to blow apart?
Well, it was hard. It was painful. But it's been good because I think I'm coming to a place where I'm more now reconstructing than I am deconstructing. And so I'm having more peace about where I'm at with what I believe. And I don't know that could have happened without my world blowing apart, honestly. But I know that there are people that deconstruct and they're not in a divorce or some crazy thing, so that for me, that's how that happened.
Awesome, Debbie. Thanks for sharing. Who else wants to share?
So what Debbie shared is something I'm kind of thinking about more in my deconstruction journey, but what kind of, I guess, like sparked my deconstruction journey would be, I was part of a lot of more conservative type churches, and I was, I guess, most recently part of like a church, part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and just my whole life, the pastors that I really respected and a lot of the teachers that I respected would always preach about, I forget the verses because I hate the verses, but they emphasized the verses that were like, women should be quiet, and basically, without saying it outright that women aren't equal to men, they basically said it in a way in their actions and how things went about. And as someone who, like, for a long time, like read the Bible every day and like prayed to God and had a relationship with Him, how they treated and talked about women in the church was so different from how I knew that my Creator like viewed me and valued me. And so for a long time I guess lied to myself, like, well, that's what the text said, like that has to be it. But as I kept wrestling with the Lord with that particular thing, like I could I don't co-sign with a lot of the conservative values in the church now, but I was able to lie to myself and believe a lot of them. But when it came to the role of women as how some of the churches kind of mention it, I was just like, that's just so different from like what I'm reading and what I'm understanding. And then that kind of triggered me, I guess, to see to look for interpretations that are not in that conservative bubble, and just to get more historical context and see that, you know, that's not the one and only, and that's not the correct interpretation, like really allowed me to break free from like what I thought was something that I had to view women as. And so that was my, I guess, catalyst into my journey.
Can anybody relate with Natalie? Anybody else want to share kind of what the journey's been like for you? I see a hand up and I don't see who it is. I'm sorry, I'm not there right now. Go ahead and jump in, Marcy.
It's me. I was just thinking of something that was just paramount is when I really started to go, wait a minute, something's really wrong. We were, my friends, my dear friends, and my spiritual mom, and me, we all went to this big revival meeting in Renton, Seattle, in Renton. And there was this man, it was during the Toronto movement, kind of at the tail end of it. That's kind of when I started to really get involved in. But I'd had faith since I was a tiny little girl. And this was the first church family I was involved in as an adult. So we're at this meeting and this man was going to pray for everybody. And then there was this huge auditorium and he said, everybody line up. And they lined up to get prayed for. And my spiritual mom and my best friend were pushing me. Like everybody was pushing each other to let this man of God lay hands on him. And I heard the Spirit of God say, go to the back of the line. And I'm like, what? So I just took a couple steps back and it happened again. Another huge line formed. There was a lot of people there and they started pushing. And I finally just went to the back of the room and sat in a chair and just, you know, I was so hurt. And so for me, it was seeing the fruit that it produced was not the fruit of love or patience or long suffering or preferring my brother or my sister over myself. Like they were literally shoving each other to have this man pray for them. And I knew that was the beginning of a very long journey, you know, accepting that I had to go. But anyway, it was the fruit.
Kind of feels like betrayal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you start to see some of your spiritual heroes maybe aren't so heroic. Anybody else want to share? Oh, go ahead, Marcy.
Question yourself, why don't I fit? Why can't I just keep my mouth shut? Why can't I just be pushed and think that's okay? You know? Why do I have to feel something about it? You know, you question yourself. So.
And why do you think that is, Marcy Ann?
Because we're taught to question ourselves. You know, we're taught to be distrusting of our own convictions.
But why do you think you were questioning what they were doing even when you're told to not?
I didn't have a choice. There was a spirit in me that was greater than my need to be accepted and fit in. Like I was so uncomfortable and that was just the beginning. There were so many things that happened after that. Like, you know, another year went on, and you know, it takes a while.
Well, that's really good. I'm going to jump in there and just you know, we're one of the things we're taught in Christianity too often is don't trust yourself. Don't trust what your heart is telling you and what your spirit is telling you. Vicky, did I see you were going to jump in there?
Well, I was just thinking, I think I went through a process that I think is typical of a lot of people. When I was young, I was very into Christianity. Like none of my parents weren't, my brother wasn't, but they allowed me to be free. And so I was on Sunday school bus and go to church. And my best friend was the daughter of the Baptist minister. And we read the Bible together when I was like 10 years old. But then when I became like 15, 16, I started really thinking about it. And then it just seemed ridiculous, like, a virgin birth, Noah's Ark, all of that stuff just seemed ridiculous. So I did like an about face 180 and I just rejected it all. And I was very hostile to Christianity for years. But then, I kept learning more about Christianity and other religions. And then I heard Marcus Borg talk at the Washington National Cathedral a few years ago. And he talked about a lot of people go through that process. When you're young, you just believe these stories without questioning, because why would you? It wouldn't occur to you that they weren't true, right? But then as you get older, then you recognize that they can't literally be true. And a lot of people are hostile. But then as you get older and more mature, you start to realize that things can be really true, even if they aren't literally true. Mm-hmm. And then that made me see the Bible in a whole new way and was pretty exciting. And where I am now is, though, I love a good sermon. I love a preacher, exhorting me to be a better person, because I think we all need to hear that, because it's so easy to not be. But I don't believe in the rapture, and I don't believe in the virgin birth, and I don't believe in all this mystical stuff. And it seems to me like I can't be a real Christian if I don't take the whole package.
Good stuff. Well, thank you guys for sharing, and we'll keep sharing on that. I think it's interesting that we are trained to sort of not trust ourselves, to sort of just dissonantly believe what we're told. And so that's a question I'm asked quite a bit by people who are in sort of the deconstruction world. Is it okay for me to ask questions? Am I still a Christian if I ask questions? Is God mad at me if I ask questions? And Love Wins is one of the really controversial books that has always been in this deconstruction space before there even probably was a term to describe it as deconstruction. Rob Bell was writing. And I love this quote from him. He says, "I believe discussion itself is divine." Like answering questions is a part of this relationship between humanity and heaven. And he points out where we see that in the Bible. Abraham does his best to bargain with God. Most of the book of Job consists of arguments by Job and his friends about the deepest questions of human suffering. God is practically on trial in the book of Lamentations, and Jesus responded to almost every question he's asked with a question. And I agree with Rob Bell on this one, that is it okay to ask questions in our religion? I think it is divine to begin to ask questions. I see a hand up. I'll jump on that in a second. But let me say, I think Jesus was the original deconstructionist. Jesus came into a time where he said, we've got to deconstruct what religion has become in our culture. And in Luke chapter 4, he gave this mantra, this mission statement of himself. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because that Spirit has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. I've been sent to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And Jesus is quoting a passage from Isaiah here, but he's a deconstructionist because he quotes the passage almost word for word, if we take it from a Hebrew to a Greek translation, that he's proclaiming liberty to set people free from, I believe, a religious bondage that says you have to look like those religious people. But he leaves out one part from the Isaiah passage. And if I were to read this whole passage, you would see that Jesus very closely is quoting the Isaiah passage, but he leaves out, "and the day of the vengeance of our God." Jesus says, I'm not going to teach a vengeful God religion anymore, because it has become destructive of human beings. And so I'm just going to say, we're in the year of the Lord's favor. You guys are all amazing. You are not under the vengeance of God. So that is my theory, that Jesus is the original deconstructionist. And even in Philippians, we're told that we should work out our own salvation with fear and trembling on a regular basis. And so when people ask me, like, how do we know we have it right when we start asking questions? How do we know we're not going into heresy? My question is always, we do this in relationship and we say, hey, I'm hearing this from heaven. What do you think? And we start to wrestle that through together. Wendell, I see your hand up. What's on your mind?
If we like the theology of Paul, the Apostle Paul.
Yeah, not me. You're talking about that Paul guy in the Bible.
Yeah. If you look at Romans 3 verse 4, he actually is coming around to validate exactly that God is on trial. And I think if you want to see it beautifully, he does ask Peter, who do you say that I am? I want you to render your judgment on me. And I think you cannot have a true friendship unless there is this bi-directional evaluation of things, a discussion of anything or everything. But, to love wins, I would suggest that love comes across as being very secure. And we can say whatever we want about it. We can bargain with it. We can do anything with it. And it's the way it behaves, as stated in 1 Corinthians 13. You can't touch it. It's amazing.
Very good. Thanks for sharing. For people who are still inside those buildings on Sunday mornings, deconstruction has become something a little bit scary for them. And I made a TikTok about this a while back, and I wanted to share this, and we can sort of talk on the other side. Think about sort of what has the experience relationally been for you as you've been walking through a rethinking of your faith, so to speak. And so this is a video about the fear that Christians have of deconstruction in this season. When our beliefs have a shaky foundation, we have to get really defensive about them.
It is time that we declare war against this deconstruction Christian movement. I don't even like calling it deconstruction Christian because there is nothing Christian about it.
That is John Cooper from the Christian music band Skillet. Not only did Cooper kind of incite violence against people rethinking their faith, he then wrote a very long dissertation on why he's so brazen about it. He said deconstructionists were recruiting kids to their mindset, and then compared it to somebody telling his daughter going off to college that her parents were wrong. It was patriarchal to ask you to brush your teeth every day. Let me help you. There's a fallacy to that argument. Cooper doesn't have to worry about his daughter being recruited to the deconstructing brush your teeth crowd because there is empirical scientific evidence for his daughter to see that if she brushes her teeth every day, her teeth and gums will be healthier, even more so if she does it more than once. The problem Cooper has is, at best, evangelical beliefs are arguable, at worst, specious and non-biblical, particularly when talking about the right-wing Christianity that Cooper has embraced. In my ebook, 5 Important Steps to Rethinking Your Faith, it's important to be willing to lay down what you believe, to know that being right is the booby pride. Part of the problem in Christianity is we need certainty, so we will settle for simple answers. And much of the time, simple certainty is wrong. At least it's arguable. And the problem is when our children go out into the world, they find out what they've been told is rock solid, uncontrovertible proof is quite controvertible. When the Bible says for us to work out our salvation daily and to be transformed by the ongoing renewing of our mind, it speaks against having a certainty and being willing to live in the nuance of let's just love each other and work it through the mess together. John Cooper, your kids aren't being recruited by deconstructionists. They're finding out their church was full of shit. And once they feel like they've been lied to, even by their parents and their pastors and their teachers, they start looking for other answers. John, the problem isn't us deconstructionists. The problem is you. When our beliefs have a shaky foundation, Sorry if I didn't give you the warning. I do tend to cuss from time to time because it has the profound effect that it needs to. So how have you guys found relationally this journey to be, as particularly we see Christians getting very upset as some, and relationships going away? And just, can anybody share a little bit of what the experience has been for you, like relationally?
You're referring to the people who have left me?
If that's what your experience is, yes.
Who have defriended me? I'm sure it's common to most of us, right?
Yeah.
And all the warnings and all the innuendo that goes along with it, right? And even from family, or maybe especially from family.
Yeah. What is that innuendo like? What has that been like for you? Anybody want to share?
Well, at least this much, it's been, whatever it is, it's usually done out of it's kind of like a deep love and care. It usually comes from some intentional, I'm trying to pull you back from the edge. And so this is what you need to know. So I take it as such,
Oh, you're very good-hearted. Do you think there any part of that of like, well, Wendell, if you're right, maybe my certainty starts to become a little shaky, so I can't allow you to be right?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Paul, the other side of it is really an open invitation to give explanation, as if I were deposed, right? So I've been deposed, and now I have to give sworn testimony of why I believe as I do. And so I have to just go back to, our proof text. We've got 66 books that are common to what we usually want to talk about. And, I know how to go exactly to the vengeance of God and speak to its loving kindness. There's a way to do it, let me just say this real quick. If you have a really great physician who's always taking care of you and your family, and he's trying to work with you on an issue, and he's submitted to you a treatment plan, and if you don't follow it over time, the condition that you're suffering with will get worse. And over time, in his care for you, he might have to intervene and be a little bit more passionate about trying to save your life. And in some regards, this is the passion, this is the vengeance of God. It's real simple.
Okay. All right. I think that the thing that's important is, we know there's sort of this struggle of wrestling with, is what I've been told not necessarily true? Am I losing relationship? And so the reason I think it's important to look at that is it starts to define the why. Why am I walking through a rethinking of my faith? Why would I do this if it costs me relationship? And I always want to point people to, and Debbie used the word reconstruction. I think we understand there is something better out there to know. There is something truer than what we've been told. And I can settle for the certainty and the community of what I knew. But God told Abraham in the Bible, I'm going to take you from the land of your fathers to a place you don't know where you're going. And that's going to be hard and difficult and scary, but it's better. And we hear in Hebrews 11 and 12, like they were looking for a city whose builder was God, that for a city that was a space of heaven. So does that make sense? I think we have to keep our eye on the idea that there is a truer relationship with heaven than what American Western Christianity has taught us is available. And that's why we go out there. Ashley, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, that's definitely what drew me into this conversation, besides my husband talking about this around the clock. During COVID, we're out working at home and like just in each other's space and hearing every little thing. And two things, as I put in the chat before, like just being increasingly so disconnected from the American church and its movement towards this, this sort of right-wing Republicanism. So it was almost like I didn't leave the church left me kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I was in shock, honestly, from that kind of started in 2008, 2009, 2010. But I think we were in a kind of church community that kept that conversation at bay quite a bit. And I was just a little bit in shock that it was real. So it's like, oh, it's not Jesus. Like, come on, no way, no way, no way. And then it just got to be like I couldn't ignore it anymore. That really was overtaking the faith in the American church. And then so that made me really uncomfortable. And then I think, Paul, you talking about there's something better, there's something more. And that kind of captured my attention. And I was like, okay, well, it's possible that I put God in a box. And it's possible it is 100% the case like that. In my seeking to be certain and understand and that sort of thing, I just kind of gotten into this routine. And I want the more, and I want deeper. And so I think a lot of people, I don't think folks in the church realize that people who are deconstructing, it's like they're deconstructing towards this hunger and this hunger for a deep connection with eternal God, eternal love, no matter what it looks like, such that we're willing to kind of even walk away from convention, if in the pursuit of like more and deeper.
Well said. It's good. I'm and I hear it a lot, like such sincerity from people of like, I don't want to take my kids to hell. I don't, there is like, I know there's something better out there, but I'm afraid that I'm doing something that's going against God. And that's why I love these conversations, to start to say, no, you have permission to look around and see something different. Natalie, I see your hand up.
Something that Ashley said kind of made me think about how I wanted to answer your question. I think you asked like how our relationships have been with the church or with the people who are still in the church. And although like some people, have kind of just, I guess, not friended me, like I still follow and people still follow me. And I like to post things that are maybe outside of what they might encounter in their echo chamber, just so that people know like that there are different interpretations, I guess. And that has allowed me to form I've become like a sort of safe space for some people. And I would say that some of the things that the American church preaches, maybe they don't do a really good job at holding discussion on it and putting a lot of biblical evidence behind it, because a lot of people, when they reach out to me, they're like, I know I'm supposed to feel this way about the abortion debate or XYZ issue, but they say in my heart or whatever, I just feel like it's wrong. And then, I get to share what I know, like my interpretation and like the biblical verses I pull from, or like the lack thereof, biblical verses for certain issues. And that allows people to, I guess, like kind of speak a little bit more freely, because I think that when they have certain discussions with people within the church, they feel like they have to they're not as free to really say what they really feel. And so just what Ashley said made me think of that. And I would say that though I maybe lost some friends, like I think some people are curious as to maybe how my deconstruction journey has allowed me to more passionately and more loudly proclaim like the love that I really believed that Jesus would have stood for.
So good. Like we're finding this whole other new community out there, and we thought we were leaving something so important behind, but we're finding each other out there, and I really do love that. That is so good. And let me share like what is kind of the keystone verse for me in all of this. When somebody's asking, is God going to be mad at me for asking questions? I love this verse, Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, this verse has different versions of different English translations, which if anybody ever says the Bible is clear, say, which of the 300 English translations would you say is the clear one? And if they say King James Version, run far away from that person, far, far away. But I think this verse not only says rethinking faith is okay and God won't be mad at you for it, it is an imperative. It is a command of being a thoughtful Christian. And what this verse says is don't be conformed to this world, but that word world is the term aeon. It doesn't mean, like I was always taught, don't be conformed to that world out there, that evil non-church world out there, like John Cooper might say. But aeon is a word that means era. Don't be conformed to the era in which you live. I think we can rightly translate it today. Don't be conformed to your community narrative. Don't be stuck in your echo chamber. Don't be stuck in your bubble. And the reason you don't want to be stuck in your bubble, because we're called to be transformed. This word metamorpho, which doesn't just mean like tweak your beliefs every once in a while with a nice sermon on a Sunday morning. Metamorpho means to be completely changed, like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, that we should completely have our beliefs overturned on a regular basis and be transformed. The only other place in the Bible this word metamorpho is used is where Jesus was transformed on the Mount of Transfiguration into this wholly different creature than he was before. So don't be conformed to your mindset or your echo chamber, but be completely transformed. This is by the renewal of your mind. And that is actually crafted by the ongoing, never-ending renewing of your mind. And so we're told, don't be conformed to our echo chamber, be transformed by the never-ending renewing of our mind. And the question is, why would we do that? And it says, so you will know what is good and acceptable and perfect. Jesus said it this way: don't try to put old wine into new wineskins. It won't be able to hold it. Don't be looking back to the old thing. Lot's wife, like, don't look back, but go forward. We see this all the time in the Bible. And Jesus said it this way about the people in his religious sayings in Matthew 13, he said, if you get stuck in this religious echo chamber, you lose your eyes to see and your ears to hear and your hearts to understand. But he says, you guys, at the very end of this Matthew 13, 14 through 16, he says, prophets have wanted to see what you can now see. And you are to be revered through all of history, because when you allow yourself to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, you get to see what is good and right and what God is doing in a season. And that is truly amazing. Without the ongoing renewing of our mind, we cannot see what God is doing in a season. And I have one more TikTok to show you, and then we're just going to open it up to discussion and relationship tonight. I believe that deconstruction is a movement of heaven. It's not just something somebody cooked up. We're seeing it happen all over the place, because I think something new is supposed to spring up in this. I saw a young woman on TikTok years ago that I have never been able to get this video out of my mind of her talking about revival. My wife and I, Ashley, who's here, of course, we were pursuing revival. What is revival going to look like in this time? And I think what we believed was going to be revival, Ashley, you can speak for yourself, but I think we got it totally wrong. And now we're seeing something totally new. And so this is a great video from this young woman who talked about what revival looks like in this season and why we're in deconstruction.
One thing that you can say that'll trigger an entire generation?
Evangelicals, Baptists, fundamentalists, conservative Christians, listen up. We've prayed for years, decades even, for a revival in the church. All I heard was, bring it back to Jesus. Lord, let them bring it back to Jesus. It's happening. It's ongoing. You're just on the wrong side of it. You prayed for a revival, you got it, and you don't like how it looks.
Woo! I love that. And I do think I think we may have gotten it wrong in some of the older generations, and the younger generation are saying, that revival you prayed for, it's freaking happening. You just don't like how it looks, boomers and Xers, so get ready. And I think we deconstruct and reconstruct and do all the things, because Isaiah 43 says something new is happening. Can you perceive it? Can you see what's happening? And we see older generations saying about our young people, oh my goodness, they're unchurched. They're leaving the buildings. Isn't this horrible? And I'm out there on social media talking with these young people going, oh my God, these people are incredible. Something amazing is happening in our generations, and they're leaving the church building behind, and they're finding God in a way that some of us in some of these older generations simply were never able to do. And man, if that's where the wind of the Spirit is blowing, that's where I want to go. And I don't want to be held back by some fear of theology, certainly not some fear of political ideology around abortion or gay marriage. I want to go where God is saying, just go love those people. Peter, I know what your biblical interpretation is, but I'm telling you, set it aside and go after the people. And that's where you're going to find the Spirit of heaven. So that's the way I look at it. So I just want to open it up. What are your guys' thoughts now as you're in your journey? What questions do you have? What encouragement do you have for one another? What are your thoughts on this idea that we're going into something new? And as you're thinking about what to share, I just want to remind everybody, I have a Deconstruction U mentorship. You can find out more on my website. And if over these next few days you email me and say, I want to start that, I'll give you a coupon code to get $50 off of that thing. And so I hate to do a commercial right at this moment of inspiration, but this is how I am able to do all the free content and things that I do. So if you've been looking for somebody just to come and walk alongside you in your deconstruction journey, go to pastor-paul.com and come join me for a Deconstruction U mentorship. So, all right, gang, what are your thoughts? What are your questions? What are your feelings out of what we've had to share together here tonight? Go ahead, Jan.
I am involved in a Celebrate Recovery community. I love it so much. And we have worship. You know, I've always loved worship. And I love music. I know there's power in music, and music moves our soul and touches our spirit. But I have struggled with it not feeling the same way. And some of the words, all the doctrine, you know, the theology that I've changed in my deconstruction and let go of is all about the outside, you know. And even last night in worship, it was about, you know, you have our permission to take up the room from the roof to the floor, you know, and like God comes in, you know, like he's outside of us, you know, and he spoke to my spirit and said, I'm here. Let me be big in you, and I will fill the room with myself in each of you. And, you know, and there was a song, Rain on Us, Rain on Us. You know, and he said, no, I'll spring up as a well, as a river of living water from each of you. And you can spill over on each other. You know, and it's not, I mean, we have God in us. That's the thing that's been really, I've seen. So, you know, if the word says that Christ in us is the hope of glory,